there are formal bios for everyone on the back of this card in case you'd like that info. But I want to actually invite the panelists to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about how they're connected to the center. Starting with Montaigne.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Montaigne Long. I'm the Associate Director of the Office of Veteran and Military Services for the Texas A&M University System. I am a military spouse, and I have been working with student veterans in higher education for the past 14 years. I got my start in California, and I came home to Texas about 6 years ago when I joined the A&M system. I have been working with CVTI since the very beginning. I met Beth Morgan in Southern California in 2017. Really got connected with the work that they were doing, and then several years ago met RJ Jenkins and have continued my work with CVTI through RJ up until now. So it's been wonderful collaboration.
Thanks so much, Montaigne.
Latoya Roberts, and I am a vice president at JP Morgan Chase, and I work within the Office of Military and Veteran Affairs. My role is primarily to assist veterans and military spouses as they transition into the corporate sector, JP Morgan, to help them have meaningful and successful careers. And we do that by implementing, veteran programs. So I met RJ through one of those programs, our Veteran Development Series. And that's a monthly session that we usually have to touch on soft skills and how our veterans can utilize their experiences into the workforce. We also have partnered on our mentoring programs as well as training for managers of veterans. So I guess I met RJ through a random email via LinkedIn after I saw one of his sessions on the imposter phenomenon. And I thought that was really powerful, and I wanted to bring that into JP Morgan for our veterans. That has grown. I think once veterans actually heard RJ, they wanted to introduce the topics to their peers and to their managers. And now for the last 2 years, we've been partnering very closely to just do that, bring those sessions and those meaningful conversations to our leadership and our veterans and spouses throughout the organization.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
How's it going, everyone? Brandon Lambert here. Happy to be here. I enlisted into the Marine Corps in 2016 and served a little over 4 years. Throughout that time, I had a fortunate military career, but I also had the ability to do higher education when my military obligations allowed me to do so. So throughout my enlistment, I went to 3 different community colleges until I eventually met Beth Morgan at a Saddleback convention, you could say. And that was my start to my transition towards Columbia University. Eventually, I was admitted to Columbia, studied here for 4 years, graduated just last semester. But my affiliation with CVTI has really grown through Next Step Inbound, which is a nonprofit organization that I fortunately was able to co-found with some other members. And since then, CVTI and Next Step Inbound have pursued many initiatives together and provided much resources for the veteran community, which we can elaborate on a little later. But that's my story.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Jonathan Santiago. Same story, similar. I joined the Army back in 2013. I got out back in 2022 from the National Guard. I was active duty first initially, and actually landed in Columbia University as I was transitioning out of the military from active duty and joined the Department of Public Safety here, where I started as a supervisor and eventually led the training for the Morningside campus. And that's where I met Dave Keefe. And we started to develop the capacity to train not just our staff on how to engage with our students at general studies, but also how to engage with the incoming hires within public safety who also were veterans within our community. Currently, I recently graduated from the School of Professional Studies with my master's in enterprise risk management, and I'm also working at Brooklyn Law School as a director for public safety, still working with our veterans community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So to all of you, it's so nice to hear about your backgrounds and just know that though there are things that connect you, also you come from really different experiences and are doing different things, which makes me that much more excited for this conversation. So, just getting right into the meat of it, kind of thinking about the veteran services space, Do you find the dominant culture to be collaborative, or do you think that it kind of needs more attention? And I'll ask everybody to kind of provide a short answer, and then we'll go to Montaigne and to Brandon for kind of follow-ups.
I say yes, it is collaborative because we come from a nature of being in the service. We collaborate to get the mission done. And when we come back home, we kind of keep that mentality.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. In a personal context, anecdotally, I have always leveraged other military members, whether it's pursuing academics or whatnot. And then professionally, of course, my answer is yes, because there's the relationship between NSI and CVTI, which I can elaborate.
I agree. I'll say yes. Our veteran population is very diverse, right? And in an effort to have impact, we do need to collaborate. So it's definitely a collaborative culture.
And I echo what everyone has said, but yes, veteran space is very collaborative. In higher education specifically, we need all of the other service providers. We need the nonprofits. We need the government agencies, right, in order to provide all the services that our students need. If I think back to the early days in 2009, 2010, I wouldn't have been able to have my start providing, resources and support for student veterans had it not been for collaborative groups like the Los Angeles Veterans Collaborative, had it not been for other professionals in the field who I learned from and who were willing to share their knowledge, right? I think about making site visits in the early days to figure out what other people were doing really well so that we could emulate those programs. I think about even now, we run a listserv of about 450 national members, but that's all about collaboration. That's about asking questions, sharing our knowledge, sharing our resources. I feel like in the veteran space, no matter where you come from, whether it's from education, it's from the nonprofit, it's from the corporate sector, we all have the same mission of supporting our military-connected individuals. And so we are very free to share our resources, to give out what we know, to ensure their success. So the collaboration has always been there, and I think it will always continue to be there.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for that and for all those examples. Brandon, more thoughts?
Sure. So for everyone's context, Next Step Inbound is a nonprofit organization that helps service members transition from military to higher education. So we're not in the space of helping undergrad go to corporate life or anything of that nature, really just that one area. We initially started publishing different articles based on military voices, trying to bring light to different issues. And since then, we've kind of remodeled the organization to kind of fill a gap we believe is pretty significant. And that is more educational / motivational content in the media form. So through CVTI and NSI collaborating, we've pursued two initiatives, one being campus tours, which I'm very, very pleased and grateful to say that our first campus tour has been a very great success. It's approaching 20,000 views on YouTube. It was here at Columbia University, of course. And one thing I might acknowledge here is 20,000 might not sound like a lot of views compared to, a viral video, but that's actually quite a big impact for this specific space. So that's one area. And then on top of that, we're also producing educational content on the side. So everyone here, I'm sure, is familiar with Khan Academy. Same model, except this is all tailored towards student veterans and or service members getting ready to transition. And same with the campus tour. Our campus, obviously, you can find many, many campus tours of Columbia University on YouTube. I believe this is the first ever professionally produced campus tour catered specifically for service members.
Amazing. It's interesting talking to both, hearing both of you talk about this, also in this way that, again, and I will be doing this repeatedly throughout the panel, but just kind of as this callback to this idea of force multiplication, that there is this way that, by creating networks, people sharing skills and being really generous collaborators, not just collaborators, but it sounds like really generous collaborators, that this idea of force multiplication is, almost culturally embedded already in the culture of the space. And so I think, and that was something too, that doing the work with this team and thinking through what the next step would look like, that there was already this culture of that. So I think drawing that out was exciting, and it sounds like what you're all saying is also affirming that. But something, LaToya, that you said that I've also been thinking a lot about it in the context of this next question. Such a diverse community of people from everywhere, all walks of life, veteran and military connected people. And so, and also, Montaigne, what you were saying about all of the many kinds of organizations and collaborators that are necessary to support the people, practitioners and veterans themselves who are transitioning. And so I'm wondering, and we'll start with this one with LaToya and Jonathan, and then if folks have follow-ups, you can join. Can you share your thoughts about collaborating across different kinds of cultures, and both what are some challenges that you might have faced or successes that you've either seen or created in that area?
Yeah, sure. I would say for me, it's been successful, right? Surprisingly successful. So originally in the past at JP Morgan, when we started our veteran development series, we tend to look for veterans within the firm to facilitate some of the sessions that we were having. Over time, I'm a veteran myself, right? So sitting in that seat, I'm like, okay, what do I want to hear? Can I do something different? And that prompted me to start looking externally. And again, it just led me, RJ honestly was the first person that we've ever done anything like this with. So it was a risk. I was nervous, but I realize now that it was something that we probably should have looked into a long time ago, because bringing in that external perspective from someone who understands veterans, from a center that has been working with veterans and understands some of the challenges and the nuances as they move into corporate space, that brought that into JP Morgan. And what we've noticed now is that there is an appetite for managers and senior leaders to hear and to understand, how can I support my veteran on my team? We have RJ and this center who can answer that, because you are working with those students who are coming into corporate spaces on a day-to-day basis. So that collaboration was unexpected. That was not the intent. I pretty much just wanted to have a one and done session. And I'm happy that it turned into something much bigger than we expected. And I'm hoping that we can continue that collaboration throughout the years to come. So
thank you so much, LaToya. Jonathan?
So originally, my collaboration came from the public safety standpoint. Oftentimes in law enforcement, you would see this barrier, us versus them mentality. And some of our service members kept that as they came into our department. So they would often be the silent person working within the department. They wouldn't share their experiences. I remember once I got promoted as a training manager for public safety, I shared my interview experience. And that was just eye-opening, where some of the questions I was asked, they knew they were going to give me the job, but it was just tailored on my military experiences. So it's, have you killed anybody? Have you? And I was like, come on. But these were the questions I was thrown at. And when I got into public safety, I said, there's a need to not just understand our student population, but our employee population. And that's where we partnered with David Keefe. And it was amazing to bring this class in and train our new hires on what is that veteran narrative. What is a veteran? Is a veteran just a male in uniform? No, it can be a woman in uniform who served for years. It can be that spouse whose husband served and they're part of that community. So we built that capacity to change that narrative for our public safety officers. And it improved a lot within our department, the retention rates. So we actually identified the percentage of members within our department who had served. And this was 10% of our department, which was shocking that nobody even looked at that to see some of our executive leadership had served in the Navy, have served in the Marine Corps. And this is a culture which was initially just forgotten. So we started to look at it from a DEI perspective, from a retention perspective, and just to incorporate that community. And it blew up. We still give the classes to our incoming public safety officers as they come into the department. While I'm no longer with the department, I hear how happy some of these veterans are to still be within our department and still serving and taking advantage of not just this center here, but the educational opportunities that are afforded to them as both employees and military service members.
Thank you so much. It's, and And I was so appreciative of this too when we were prepping this panel, because what a lovely answer that helps me transition into my next question, which is this idea, and again, sort of coming back to unpacking force multiplication a little bit, that it's not that it's necessarily a new thing or a massively different thing, but more about reshaping the way that you're thinking about how you go about serving the communities that you're serving and what the sort of most impactful way of doing that can be. And so, your response is really, not only is it like a nice aha moment, but also really helps you to think differently. And hopefully that new information, I feel like in our culture, we're always like sort of striving to optimize in this way that isn't always healthy, but sometimes necessary and valuable. And I think, having that insight that helps you rethink and reshape the way you're approaching things, and really starting from a place of ideals can help with that. And so, the next question is in the best collaborations that you all have had, and this could be personal, it could be professional, it could be artistic, if that's your thing. What have they looked like? How have they started? How have they evolved over time? Have they been long lasting? Like what has that been? And I will look to Brandon first, and LaToya, and folks, if you have a follow up, please follow up.
Sure. Well, I think this was alluded to earlier, but one thing that really draws everyone together in this military space is that we all have one goal in mind, which is, serving other military members and whatnot. So I think that is key to having a healthy collaboration. I do, if you don't mind me kind of going around this question a little bit, I do want to acknowledge one area I think we could have more collaboration, whether it's corporate, personal, whatnot. And thank you, Dean Rogers, for saying that personal story, because it's motivating me to say this. But I do believe there is a significant lack of acknowledgement and really emphasis of just how little resources service members truly have when they are trying to transition and or just leave the military service. I know on paper it may seem very elaborate. For my anecdotal experience, it's not. Just to kind of put into context, I remember when I was going to TRS, which is Transition Readiness Seminar that the military does, or specifically the Marine Corps. Army has another version of it. It's all equivalent. You're supposed to take it 12 months prior to getting out. Some guys were in there three weeks prior to getting out. I remember, this is a true story, almost verbatim. My instructor said, the best way to get a job is to go to your local mall, walk around the mall, introduce yourself to random people, and say, hello, my name is so-and-so. I'm looking for a job. Do you know anyone? Yeah. And I should have prefaced this. I don't say that to belittle the intentionality there. I say that to really just raise awareness and acknowledge the severity of the situation in some contexts, because service members don't want to talk about this when they go home and they're with their family for 2 weeks and then they have to go back. Some people are too proud of their service to acknowledge flaws sometimes, but I believe you have to acknowledge flaws to correct them. So I thought I'd say that is an area in which I think more collaboration is very much needed in understanding the lack of resources in some contexts.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just sort of add to that. I think honesty and like being willing to speak uncomfortable truths is a really critically important part of collaboration that is often under discussed, because we all want to be like, we're, everyone's holding hands, we're working as a team, it's great. But I mean, we all know that collaboration, we've been talking about it since kindergarten, and it's real work and requires skills that we do not just have. Anyway, please, LaToya.
Oh, no, I was going to, piggyback on what you said. I think an area that we can collaborate a little bit more, now that you brought that up, is about helping folks understand what services are actually out there, right? I think we can do a lot more in terms of offering more opportunities for our vets, but there are a lot of nonprofits that are out there and corporations that are out there that can help veterans along their transition journey. I know we try really hard and we partner with a number of nonprofits as well. So I think if there is an area for us to really, tap into, it would be trying to somehow, and probably we can talk after, on finding out how we can pull all those resources together so that veterans know what that looks like. And yes, having those honest conversations, I think is important. For me, I'm not a recruiter, but I just came back from 3 weeks in Norway. I'm a reservist. And I know I left with probably about 4 or 5 folks who are probably going to be calling Mark because they are transitioning. And whenever I have that opportunity to say, hey, have you thought about, I know what, your officer might be saying or somebody within your unit might be saying about the scary world that's out there. But it's not that scary because there are a bunch of people like us all in this room who are here to support in any way that we can. So here's a resource. This is this person's phone number. This is my email. Call me and I'll try to connect you to folks. So I think that is probably an area that we really do need to see how we can tap into and close that gap.
Amazing. So this is a little bit off script, but given the direction of this conversation, which is wonderful, Montaigne and Jonathan, I'm wondering how this hits for you, and it could either be things you think are working, things you think could improve, or things that are maybe critical about collaborating effectively in this space.
So I'll just add in, similar to his experience. I mean, when I was coming out from the Army, I did 5.5 years on active duty, and I had that same year span to utilize what was called SFL TAP. And in that year, I deployed to Poland, Operation Atlantic Resolve for 6 months. I came back a week later, seeing my wife for about 5 days, and I jumped right into a warfighter. Then I got back for another week, setting up my gear ready to clear it out so I can clear the post, and I jumped into another warfighter. And this whole time, I was trying to get into this SFL TAP to use those resources, and I never really got to use it. So I can see that on the active duty side, and I didn't really get in touch to these resources until I got out and joined the National Guard, where guys was like, hey, have you ever heard about helmets to hard hats? Have you ever heard about this resource or these resources? And I was like, I didn't know any of this was available. Where was this? And initially that challenge, it almost feels like you're lost in the space. So when it happened to me, I kind of turned it in fold, and I started reaching out to guys that I knew were getting out, and they wanted to go to college. And I was like, hey, you have your GI Bill. Did you know some of your employers actually pay for your education as well? When I got to Columbia, and I actually had my master's paid for while I was working at Columbia, and managed to use my GI Bill to gather master's degrees. So I got 3 masters within a matter of 4 years. And I got hooked on the education. And initially it was just because, similar to a lot of people here, they would tell you, you're never going to get into Columbia. Why are you trying to study business? You're an MP. I was told you're pretty much a grunt, right? What are you doing? Go into aviation, make money, or stick with a cop. Don't get the help. Don't get treatment if you want to go to the VA, because it's going to affect your career. And none of that was true. And when I got out, I started talking to service members who had these same experiences, some within the Department of Public Safety, who were telling me, man, my back is hurting. I served for 20 years and I was an airborne guy. And I was like, well, go to the VA, get checked out. It's never too late. And they just started to do it. And I realized it's so much in the selfless service of giving back to others that you create this network, which is amazing. People from different backgrounds, different careers. And it's just a never-ending, I'd say, partnership that you keep adding on. You keep adding on, keep giving back. It's like a spider web that you just continue to connect people on. And it's amazing.
So, in the veteran space, I think we all know there are literally thousands of organizations. We had this conversation earlier. You know where I'm going. We like to say that we collaborate, but there's organizations that really do collaborate, but there are other ones that are very maybe possessive. And are we really collaborating though? Or are we holding on to our information, and are we really sharing it with the people who really need it? There's people that collaborate really well, and there's organizations that don't collaborate very well, right? And I think it's keeping in mind, what's the end goal? Is it force multiplication? Is that what it's about? Is it about helping the veteran? Is it about helping the military-connected person? or is it like personal gain, you know? And I have seen this over the years, that there are people who are very, very willing to collaborate and share and give freely and openly, because it's not about them, it's about the veteran. And there are others that claim that they want to collaborate, but they don't. And so it's at that point that the veteran suffers. So,
I mean, I think, going into this conversation, having done some work myself with CVTI, despite not being really an insider in military connected culture, and also, on top of that work, having talked to these folks, I'm still bowled over by how many examples of different ways that folks are collaborating formally, informally, interpersonally, just like calling up your people, coming and collecting your people when you have information, making sure that, you're sharing it out. And I guess I'm wondering, from where we're standing now, and given, what Montaigne, what you were just talking about, and thank you for also making that point, and all of you for kind of making the points about what could improve, what's difficult, what's challenging, because again, the honesty part and communication, of course. And also, there's a space of agreement around, what are we doing here? Who are we trying to serve? And, that can start with talking, but often I think would benefited, and I know I'm not alone in this, folks in the room would benefit from starting with listening. And so, thinking about something like force multiplication as a model, or other kinds of these really peer-based skills share, specifically generous type of collaborations that folks are doing, what do we need more of? What do we want to amplify? And I'll just start by saying, I think the truth speaking, even at the beginning of the little time that we have, I think is a really good place to start. But where should we go? Where do we want to go? What's important now? The world is ever more complicated. I'm not throw that.
Yeah, no, I can comment real quick. First, I agree with all three sentiments. I think it's an awareness issue. There's numerous resources out there. Service members have no way to actually engage with them. And this is in the context of active duty enlisted, just to be clear. One thing that is also very important from my experience, that there's a very thick culture around service members doubting their ability to actually pursue higher education. And we learned this through our own ambition and initiatives on trying to help people transition, where we learned you can produce the best piece of educational content out there, and it's utterly useless if a service member doesn't believe they can actually pursue higher education and be successful. And that is when we decided to allocate about 50% of our time and energy to more motivational material, just showing service members that it is possible, different stories, introducing them to the idea, trying to capture them to where once they get to the point where they say, I'm ready to take that next step, pun intended, organization's next step inbound, we're ready to then give them more of the educational side of things. But my main emphasis here is that there is a very, very thick culture within the enlisted branches where service members do not believe that they can actually be successful. And that is why the GI Bill is so underutilized.
One of the things that I wrote down from Dean Rogers' remarks, the soft bigotry of low expectations. Just want to bring that up again. And I think, and I would love to hear from other folks, but I'll just say that in our culture in general, and also clearly very specifically among, folks who are active duty and beyond, this is something that, assuming, actually, I saw a tweet, I wish that I had written it down because it's so relevant, but it essentially was oh, no, it wasn't. It was someone I knew on Facebook posted an excerpt from a job description that it was a public school. It wasn't teaching, it was an aide. And it was someone who believes unequivocally that every child can learn at a high level. And so, so that beautiful point. And please, folks, anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, just adding into what he was sharing, I think a lot of it is also getting the veterans out. Because when veterans come out from the service, often we have a community within our own. And finding that community when you reintegrate can be extremely difficult. I was at Columbia for years and I didn't know about this space until I reached out to Dave when he gave a class, and I was like, hey, there's so much that we would like to do and partner on. But part of it is just getting out and communicating with one another, pulling people in, asking someone, what's their experience with a veteran? Whether it be your father served, your mother served, or your neighbor's a veteran, and how has that worked for you? Or has it not worked? What is your bias against the veteran community? And sharing these biases, it helps to break down some of these walls. And a lot of it is just communication and forming those communities when you come back home. I've met so many veterans that were just so isolated for years. And when they finally open up and find these communities, they're like, where was this? Where was it? Whether it be at Columbia, I mean, Mel's Burgers was a great spot for me. I'd go there and I met people who were from all walks of life. I mean, I met veterans who served in the French military. And I was like, wow, what are you doing here? And they said, I'm going to general studies. And I was like, it's amazing just to see how much you can learn just by getting out there and talking to people. And I think that's the first start. Just have that conversation and you'll open up a lot of doors.
So I think my thought about what do we need more of in the collaborative space is more of thinking about what do our veterans need. In higher education, maybe my institution is not the right fit for you, but I'm going to help you find the right fit institution, right? So what is the best interest of that student? Maybe my nonprofit doesn't have the best resource for you, but I'm not going to send you on a wild goose chase. I'm going to use my collaborative network to get you to the right nonprofit organization to get you the right resource. Maybe my corporation is not the best fit for your values or what you want your end career goal to be, but instead of trying to squeeze that square peg into a round hole, why don't I align you with a better corporation and use my, again, collaboration and my network to get you into the right place where you need to be. I wish that we had more collaboration that looked like that. That instead of like, oh, I need to hold on to you and I need to, again, this kind of possession of like let me take care of you. How do I get you where you really need to be? Let's, again, keep that end goal in mind about who we're serving and what that person needs.
And I would just add that I think what we can do a little bit more of is mentoring, right? I feel like if we have opportunities and programs in place for veterans to talk to other veterans who've been through it, who've made it, who have successful careers, whether it's in nonprofit, finance, whatever it is. It's connecting veterans to keep that dream alive that you can do it, right? I'm enlisted in the Navy Reserve right now. And, just me being honest with folks who are still going through it. I've had folks ask, and someone actually had me thinking the other day, they were like, hey, have you ever thought that you would be a vice president at JP Morgan Chase and Company? And my answer was no, I didn't think so. That was never a thought in my mind. I just wanted to get out and find a job and get by, right? If I'm being very honest. And it just so happened that I stumbled across a program that we currently have at JP Morgan. And I'm like, well, I have nothing to lose. And I applied. And I would say getting in, it changed my life because now I did have my community because there were a lot of veterans. I was supported. But the thing that helped me the most was my mentor. I was connected with someone who helped me navigate the space, who helped me believe in myself that I belong here because we do have imposter phenomenon, right? So I think if there's an opportunity coming from this conversation in creating a mentoring program or a space where we can all collaborate and share and have those really honest conversation about how we really felt getting out, and sometimes the doubts that still that we have to, the challenges that we still have to push through to be heard, because it's not easy, and I think it's harder, to your point, for enlisted to find their place in this big space in thinking of, hey, I can go to an Ivy League college. Someone actually said that to me when I talked about coming here. So I think it's just having those conversations and reaching out and sharing and pulling everyone through. So again, it can be done. We're all here, so we can definitely collaborate and get it done. So,
I mean, not rehearsed. Couldn't have said it better myself. No, I mean, really, truly, thank you. Perfect kind of nice, like period ellipsis on sort of what's possible next. And also, just want to, be like we're all here being CVTI cheerleaders, but also this is one of the best places to do this. This is the place that is built for this. Yes, doing more of it here, elsewhere, in networks and communities that CVTI is supporting, that that you're building away from here, that I'm sure this team here wants to know about. And on that note, would love to take a couple questions from you all or comments from you all. Yes, let me pass you a mic.
My name is Abby Kinch. I'm with Student Veterans of America. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences. I'm going to talk to you more. My question and a challenge that I've faced forever since I've been in this space is we do such a good job, although we have room for improvement, we do such a good job working with the folks who walk into offices like these, who come to programs at our corporate offices, who, engage with other veterans in the space. What can we do to create environments that encourage folks who may not have the best relationship with their veteran identity, but still need those transition services, still need those connections, still need those employment opportunities and resources, and still need those higher education resources?
Yes, thank you for that. It allows me the opportunity to talk on how I struggled with my veteran identity. When I was leaving the military, I was very much ready to be done with that lifestyle. I wanted that chapter closed. For the first 2-3 years at Columbia, I engaged in no veteran initiatives, never stepped foot in here. I just wanted to move on with my life for various reasons. And, speaking of courage, it took me, when I was trying to work up the courage to go step into the educational center on base to speak to someone that might be able to give me some information. It took me months to finally get to the point where I said, I'm doing this. To be more transparent, I barely graduated high school. I graduated with a 2.2 GPA. I don't think I was, subpar when it comes to intelligence. I just was not valuing school. When I graduated Columbia, I had almost a 4.0 GPA. Very grateful to say that because of the guidance here. But I think awareness is one of the main things we can do. Not many people walk through the door. That's the point I'm really trying to acknowledge. It takes a lot to walk through the door. And what's very sad to acknowledge is that when some people do walk through the door, they don't actually get the resources they need. This isn't my personal story, but one of my good friends, when he walked into the educational center's office, she handed him, and he expressed to her he's ready to pursue higher education after months of contemplating. She handed him a pamphlet for a welder or a plumber. And that's not to say that those aren't good occupations. However, more veterans deserve to have the shot to be that JPM VP and have the guidance to be able to do that. It's very hard. It's very hard to communicate to that demographic. We try to do it every day. We have tried to go down the social media route and just post more comedic, pieces of content to gain someone's attention. But that's something that CVTI and NSI talk about regularly. How do we communicate with this demographic to bring more people through that door? It's very hard. I think organic means is probably the best way, through social media and or other various means of outreach.
And I would just add to, I think it's partially trying to make things normal, like creating that safe space where saying, hey, I'm a veteran is okay, right? So I think you have to sort of address the culture and get the buy-in from the people that matters, be it professors, folks that the veterans are coming into contact with on a day-to-day basis. I know still sometimes I struggle with my veteran identity because of the stigma that sometimes come with it, right? I don't usually offer up, hey, I'm a vet, because again, most folks would think, one, you're uneducated, especially if they find out that you're enlisted. I deal with that a lot, right? So you're not smart, you're not educated, you're suffering from PTSD, all of those things that you worry about. And I don't want to be labeled. So sometimes I walk into the room and I'm just LaToya, right? Reality is I am just LaToya. And being a veteran is part of my identity, as well as being a mom, being a woman, all of those things. But I think if we create an environment where we are okay with that, and that comes with training the people who are leading to realize and recognize that it is okay, that we are just like anyone else, and we are dealing with the stuff in society like everyone else, and just being a vet is just another little part of that. It's a great honor. It's a thing we all decided to serve. But the culture really, really makes a huge difference in whether or not someone wants to raise their hand to say, I am a vet.
And I think in higher education, thank you for saying this, we have to remember that our student veterans are students first, and always remembering that intersectionality of students and parents, students and caregivers, students and partners, right? Like, I think about this all the time. Like, that is just a small piece of who they are, but that we have to offer programming that is relevant to all of the different facets of their identity, considering that they're students first, and a veteran is just a tiny piece of who they are.
No,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. The only thing I would add on the veteran side is, for those who have served, don't gatekeep. If you have these resources, and this is something I've always said, share them. Like, open that book up. How did you get to where you're going to be or where you're going? And share that with other people. Like, I've had senior leaders that got out of the military. One most recently, my sergeant major, when he retired. And I was like, come to New York, please. Come be my boss, right? Work here. And I think sharing these jobs, these opportunities, and sharing these resources is so important. Don't just keep it to yourself. Whether it's sharing it to another veteran or family member, just throw it on Facebook, LinkedIn, share what's happening. And a lot of people will probably grab onto that because they know you rather than the resource.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. You guys have actually been great. Actually, picking up from what you were just saying, I think that a lot of times we do still do like a good job when it comes to like that community system support. I've seen it myself here at Columbia, where there's some areas where that support lacks. Some of us come up and like it's like stand for each other. But how can you reconcile when you have that individual support, but it lacks that intersectionality and that interdependency at a systemic level? Because I believe that a lot of the reason why we have that a lot of these issues is that at a system level, it's just very flawed and very broken. So how much can the individual really be effective when at a system level it is so broken? How do we reconcile that?
So, great question.
I know it's loaded, but
No, one of the things like I've always stuck to is be the change you want to see in your environment, or the change you want to see in the world. And you do that as first you identify what's the problem. How can you fix that problem? And is it something that you yourself can fix? Like, when I got to Columbia, I realized, hiring process initially was terrible for our veteran community. How can I fix this? Well, I asked, can I be on the interview panel? And we would get resumes where guys, and I knew it because I did it, right? I take straight from my NCOER and I throw it right on my resume and I say, these are my bullets. I served as a sharp. And they're like, what are all these acronyms? Right? So training people to understand it and even that small bit can change so much within your environment, right? When David presented to our, when he presented to our community, a lot of our managers didn't realize some of the biases that they were subjecting some of their employees to and why we had so much turnover. Like, we had an amazing veteran that we hired at Columbia to be a member of our public safety team, and within 3 weeks, he went to NYU. And I was like, it wasn't even a matter of they were paying a little bit more, but it was just the culture of the environment. And you have to start there, the culture a little bit. Changing that, being the change you want to see in your environment. Don't just say this is it, right? Try to do something. Now, whether it's that small, changing the interview process, changing the way you communicate, or just showing that community that there's more besides a service for the veteran.
Other folks? I actually have some thoughts about this too. I would say that I also just a thing that I heard in your question too is just, frustration, dismay, potentially. I mean, not that you sounded angry, but also like anger, right? Implicit in just like how that wasn't coming from you, but this is me projecting into what you're talking about, right? It's like you're being asked to fix things that you can't fix. And you're being put in a situation where they're like, succeed. And you're like, not what I see, And I think part of it, in addition to what Jonathan was saying, claim the agency that you have, also acknowledge the anger, frustration, and dismay and the validity of all of those things in confronting systems that you cannot change. And recognizing that, while claiming the agency that you have around you and being the change and continuing to, to sort of do the work to show up that way. And, to be clear, like what I'm proposing is not a solution, but I think there is like a kindness and compassion that it's really important to hold for yourself inside of larger circumstances that are out of your control. Because we can't just preach a culture of personal responsibility inside of systems that don't allow us to repair them. We can also do that, but I mean, more things have to be true.
Does CVTI envision a world where we can impact the TAPS that happens when the veteran is leaving the military, right? And so, again, my experience, although I guarantee you, Lambert, right? His experience.
Military.
Yeah, sorry. That's all I remember. No idea what your first name is. Sorry. But
Good to go, Gutty.
Thanks. And here we are. So, although I guarantee you that our military experiences are very different, you were telling my TAPS story, right? And that's really sad. And I think it's obvious for everyone in the room that that's the beginning, like that's the root cause of the problem. The military loves you until you say that you're leaving, and then they really could care less. And I have a lot of problems with that. So do all of you, right? We can agree. But so is there a world that CVTI envisions like influencing them? Like, just might as well don't do a TAPS, just send everyone to CVTI, right? Or something like that, because it's actually detrimental what they're doing. Dean Rogers' example is something that I heard at multiple education center. And so I'm just curious if we've ever thought of that.
That's an easy question. Fix the government. No.